Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Jack Joyce, and I'm a resident of Castle Hills, and at this time, one of our aldermen here in the city. And it's my pleasure to welcome you all to our second Speakers Forum. We have a terrific evening planned for you. This evening, we're going to be talking about real estate. We're going to start out with a conversation about residential real estate, then move into commercial real estate, and finally finish up with a conversation about live workspaces, which are becoming kind of a popular thing here in certain areas of San Antonio. But in any event, we had a terrific night on Tuesday night. Just if you don't mind my recapping what we did Tuesday, we did some of the fundamentals, I think, of comprehensive planning. We had a presentation by our architects, LPA architects, who kind of explained to us what a comprehensive plan is and why we need them. We had a conversation about zoning, including our alderman, Joe Isbrand, who used to be on the zoning board, and Juan Solis, the current chair. So we had a really good conversation about zoning with the learning the ABCs, and then discussions about specific issues with Castle Hills. And also Amy McClinn, our committee chair, presented a sort of an update on where we are in the process and a summary of the survey we did back in February. And all of those presentations are currently on the website, folks. And there's a gentleman here with me this evening, Scott Figueroa, who is single-handedly responsible for getting all of these things on the website and actually setting the website up. So Scott, thank you. So anyway, let's get into it. We're going to start with a conversation about residential real estate. And Ms. Norma McClelland, who was gracious enough to accept our invitation to speak to us this evening, invited a woman by the name of Theresa Casey, who is the chair-elect of the San Antonio Board of Realtors. So we're delighted to have you both here this evening with us, ladies. Thank you very much. And I think we'll invite Ms. Haslacher to begin. And if I might, Tracy, do you wish to present your own, put on your own presentation, or would you like us to show it for you?
I believe I've got Janice and Brett Findlay from the Board of Realtors who are going to move the slides for me.
Oh, okay.
Janice, correct?
Yes, ma'am. I'm right here. I'll be sharing the slides.
Okay, great.
Okay, well, I believe we're going to start with you guys. So please feel free to start whenever you're ready.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me this evening. I am Theresa Casey, the 2021 chair-elect for the San Antonio Board of Realtors. I'm so pleased to be with you this evening to share more about the Bexar County housing market. If we can get to the first slide, I know Janice, you're trying to bring that up, on annual sales trends. So while 2020 was certainly an unusual year, it didn't stop people from buying homes. In 2020, there were 27,855 homes sold in Bexar County. That's approximately 11% more than the year before. So far this year, Bexar County has sold a total of 13,847 single-family homes. The sold to list price. The sale to list ratio is the final sales price, what a buyer pays for the home. It's divided by the last list price expressed as a percentage. If it's above 100%, the home sold for more than the list price. If it's less than 100%, the home sold for less than the list price. Of the homes sold in Bexar County, 97.4% of them sold for their list price in 2020. We've seen a bit of an increase in this number in the first 6 months of 2021, with 100% of homes listed selling for their list price. Next slide. Year-to-date sales, average sales price. Last year, average home sales price increased 8.1% to $276,237 from 2019. In the first quarter of 2021, we've seen a 16.2% increase to $345,841 year to date. These price changes can likely be attributed to the increase in demand and the limited supply we've had over the past year. In less than 5 years, we have seen a 51% increase in average sales price in Barrett County. That's 51% increase in average sales price. Year-to-date median sales price. Likewise, the median prices in Barrett County have also experienced increases. In 2020, the median price was $239,000, an 8.1% increase from 2019. This year, median prices rose 22% to $292,000. Since 2016, median sales prices have gone up roughly 50%. Days on the market. Average days on market have stayed pretty consistent over the past few years, hovering around the low 50s, but we've seen a shift in the first part of the year. Last year, the number of days on the market was 52, and this year we've hit just 35 days on the market before a home closes. While this number has dipped, the San Antonio area is still ahead of Dallas-Fort Worth, which averages 28 days, Houston 29 days, and Austin 13 days. The number of homes priced under $200,000 was just under 8,200 in 2020. Of the homes sold this year, 3.075 have been under $200,000. This is a drop from previous years as interest rates remain low, allowing people to get more house for their money. The Barrett County market is on track to have roughly 6,000 homes sold under the $200,000 price point, which would represent almost less than half the total number sold in 2016 and 2017, respectively. Total sales by price range, $200,000 to $299,999. Homes priced between $200,000 and $299,999 accounted for 11,692 sales in 2020. That's nearly 2,300 more than 2019 and is about 3,900 more than in 2018. So far this year, 7,388 homes sold have been under $300,000. Next slide. Total sales by price range, $300,000 to $399,999. Homes priced below $400,000 in 2020 increased by about 800 homes from 2019. This year, we've seen an increase in homes in this price bracket with over 3,000 homes sold in 2021, surpassing the totals from 2016 and 2017 already through the first half of the year. Next slide. Total sales by price range, $400,000 to $499,999. Additionally, homes priced between $400,000 and $499,999 have increased in the past year and a half, with 1,799 sold in 2020 and 1,386 sold in the first 6 months of 2021. The housing market is in store for a record year for homes sold in the $400,000 price range, passing totals from 2016 through 2019 already through the summer. Next slide. Total sales by price range, $500,000 and up. Sales above $500,000 accounted for 1,721 of the sales in 2020, an increase of over 500 from 2019. The trend continued into 2021 with 1,497 homes already sold in this range. New construction total sales. The sale of single-family new construction homes rose significantly last year to 6,400, an increase of 1,836 from 2019. So far this year, we've seen 2,810 new construction homes sold. Next slide. New construction prices. As you can see, both the average and median price of new construction homes have increased this year, with an average price of $296,436 and median price of $264,900. These increases can be attributed to the rising cost of lumber and the current labor shortage. Next slide. New construction price distribution. The price distribution for single-family new construction homes has shifted price ranges tremendously since 2016. In 2016, 23% of new construction was priced between $100,000 to $199,000. Today, this percentage has dropped to only 6%. Next slide. Moving on to county comparisons. Bexar County has remained more affordable than other major metropolitan areas. As you can see, Bexar County's median price was at $292,000 year to date, compared to $298,000 in Harris County, $330,000 in Dallas County, and $560,000 in Travis County. While median prices have increased in 2021, we are still seeing greater affordability in Bexar County. Next slide. County comparisons year to date. Historical county comparisons for median sales price dating back the last 4 years shows Bexar County on a similar upward trend as Harris and Dallas counties have been far outpaced by Travis County. Next slide. Months of inventory by year. We saw a lot of demand for homes in 2020. The year started with 1.6 months of inventory available, which is already pretty low. And that number is down to just 1.3 months this year. You can see how much lower that is than in previous years. And that's about the lowest we've ever seen here. Next slide. Total monthly active listings by year. In June 2020, we had 5,317 active listings. This is a change from the 3,182 active listings we had in June of 2021. While this is a big change from last year, it is an improvement from May 2021, which was 2,984. Next slide. Texas sales and median slide. In Texas, there have been over 183,500 homes sold, which is over 15% more than this time last year. And the median sales price was $315,000, a 16% increase over 2020. It's amazing to see how much growth we had in our market even during a pandemic. And we expect to continue to see growth throughout the remainder of 2021. Next slide. Castle Hills sales trends. If we specifically dive into Castle Hills, you can see similar housing trends as that of Bexar County. 2020 showed a spike in sales, the second highest since 2016, with 66 homes sold. However, since the start of 2021, we have seen 27 homes so far, showing the year may end with a more average number of homes sold. Next slide. Castle Hills average sales price by year. The average sales price has also dropped slightly from 2020. Right now, the average sales price is $415,296. That is approximately $13,000 less than last year and still over $44,000 more than 2019. Again, the high demand for housing has increased the price of homes throughout the year. Next slide. Castle Hills median sales price by year. The median sales price between 2020 and this year is slightly different. This year, we can see a $3,000 drop. However, again, a significant increase from 2019 by $45,000. Next slide. Castle Hills days on the market by year. The days on the market also follow the county trend. You can see so far this year, the days on market, DOM, is only at 45 days compared to 76 days in 2020. High demand and low inventory is a contributing factor to this number. This wraps up my part of the presentation. It has been a pleasure to be with you this evening to share more about what's happening in our market and in Castle Hills. You can also reach me anytime at chairelect@sabor.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tracy. We appreciate it very much. Folks, are there any questions for Tracy before we get into Norma's presentation?
Okay.
Well, does somebody have a question? I do have a question if nobody else has one. Tracy, do you, in looking ahead, you know, this is a comprehensive plan we're trying to do. Do you think the numbers and the metrics you've shown us from the last few years, is that something that we're going to continue to see, or do you think things are going to at some point normalize? And I know it's not a fair question to ask when, but you know, in showing us as much of the future as you dare, what do you see ahead for Castle Hills?
Well, Castle Hills and just San Antonio proper. I've in the past maybe 3 weeks, I've noticed a slight, I don't know if I would call it a slowdown, but the frenzy is not quite as vicious as it was earlier in the year to get to a home and get it under contract. I think at some point, you know, you're going to see things normalize. I don't know when that's going to be. Some people are going to call it a slight correction. I don't know if we have a correction for San Antonio. We were such an affordable city to live in, including Castle Hills and surrounding cities. I think a lot of it is going to depend on what happens between now and the end of the year. If interest rates go up and that kind of thing. So it's really just a wait and see.
Tracy?
Yes, sir.
I wanted to ask another quick question. This is kind of in the last 2 years, seems to be a great spike in home sales, I'm sure, based on low interest rates, among other things. How is this translating in property taxes? In other words, is this a overblown estimate of home values based on just the market today? How is that going to counteract and communicate with our property taxes?
Tracy, I'm happy to step in there if you need help on that one.
Okay. Okay.
Sure, yeah. Thanks for your question, Barry. Brett Findlay, Director of Government Affairs at the San Antonio Board of Realtors. So, you know, as anything in real estate, as prices and the sales market side appreciate, likely your good old friends at the Bexar County Appraisal District will probably be following suit if you haven't seen an increase on your annual property appraisal, which, you know, obviously it's a mathematical question at that point, right? The higher your appraisal, even if tax rates stay relatively the same, you're going to be multiplying that rate times, you know, whatever your new home appraises at. And so, you know, obviously it's a good thing, right? I mean, nobody gets in the business of buying a property to see the sale of that property depreciate in value over time. So it is a good thing, but unfortunately, you know, that's sort of the cost of doing business as a homeowner. You're going to see an increase in your annual property taxes just because, you know, the cost of real estate here in Bexar County as a whole is just continues to increase. I would encourage, you know, everyone on this call, if you haven't taken advantage of your over 65 you know, property tax exemption, you know, military, disabled, and also just your general homestead exemption on your residential property, to please do so. Those are, if you ever have any questions about that, we're happy to walk you through that process. But any sort of tax relief of any size or quantity, it certainly helps in the process.
Thank you.
And Brett, I would add to that, you know, when we work with our buyers and our sellers, the tax assessor will send out a questionnaire, and most buyers, it'll go to their home and it asks questions like, how much did you pay for your house? You don't have to fill those forms out. That's the tax assessor trying to figure out how much you really paid for the house so they can raise your taxes. The realtors and SABOR, you know, vigorously protect our property owners by not disclosing that information. And so that is just a good thing for realtors to tell their buyers and their sellers. Did you sell this house? What did you pay for it? Don't answer it. You just bought a house. What did you pay for it? Don't answer it. You don't have to. So try to keep it on the down low on the QT and don't share.
Good advice.
Any other questions for Tracy? Okay. Well, thanks so much, Tracy. We appreciate it so much, your expertise and that of Brett as well. Thank you both for joining us. And so at this point, let's ask Norma to begin her presentation, which I believe is a little bit more in-depth look at Castle Hills and what some of the perhaps opportunities might be here as we look to the future. Norma?
Thank you, Jack. And Tracy, thanks again, and Brett as well for chiming in. We really appreciate your input.
You're
So-
welcome.
Oh, thank you. I'm Norma McClelland, and I'm a proud resident of Castle Hills, as well as a realtor with Phyllis Brown and Company. The information that I'll be providing will be partially from Sabor's multiple listing service, as well as resident opinion. So the multiple listing service information that I'm providing is on the last 6 months, whereas Tracy's was from January to July. So there's more like mid-February to now. So in Castle Hills, we currently have 16 active listings, which means they are for sale at this point. We have, and of course, this is pre-owned homes. We have 8 pending listings, meaning that they are under contract and gone through the active option period. Again, meaning that they have gone through the inspection phase of the contract and now heading towards closing and appraisal, or appraisal and closing. In this last 6-month period, I counted a total number of 33 homes that have sold in the Castle Hills proper area. And I even went as far as to check lots and acreage. Now in multiple listing service, or MLS, we have 1 active listing and 1 pending and 1 sold. Now, in addition to that, residents around the city of Castle Hills have probably noticed that we have a number of lots and acreage for sale by owner. We have some acreage on Winston Lane that is for sale, as well as individual lots. And then we have 2 individual lots, basically on the corner of Danny Lane and West Avenue. So in addition to these last 6 months, or the information from the last 6 months, I've been asked to provide information as to potential residential home growth in Castle Hills. So I will start out with I'm going to mention numerous types, but I'll start out with apartments. In my research, I actually found out that there is a history of residents speaking out against apartments. And the reasons that they have then remain a valid concern today. So the first one was tenants are transient. So there's a constant influx of people coming in and out, and maybe even 6 months, 12 months might be the normal, but it could be every 12 months someone's coming in and out of an apartment. And because it is temporary, or the tenants are temporary, they're not really invested in the community, and probably because they really haven't thought about it or not interested. So then another one of the concerns that residents have had along the years are that there's a good probability that they're not going to want to contribute to the city of Castle Hills. So again, these are the same. I understood that these reasons were voiced very long ago when there was an issue of apartments being built, and then even more recently. Now, the next type of housing I'll discuss is garden homes and townhomes. So there's a more likely acceptance of these 2 types of housing, and it would be depending on the type of zoning of the property. For instance, garden homes more than likely would be built on a single residential zoned lot. And even though we do have some large lots in San Antonio, it's not unusual to have a garden home, which could be a little bit smaller, but on a larger lot. It just varies depending on what the owner wants. And in this case, potentially what the builder would want to build. But typically, garden homes, like townhomes, typically builders will purchase a number of adjacent properties and then want to build either a garden home community or a townhome community. So in this instance, if they were originally single-family homes, then that would mean that not only would the property need to be replatted, but also rezoned, since the individual lots were as single-family and not multifamily. And I've experienced this with clients myself in the past. And what I did notice was that in the process, there was a requirement of questions that went out to the neighboring homes to ask them whether they would be in favor or against of this community being built in their area. So residents do have a voice in this when something is being replatted and rezoned. And it does take about a 3-month, it takes about 3 months to get all of this done. So it's nothing quick, nothing fast. So there's plenty of time for people to get involved. So another question that I had regarding potential growth for residents would be for our mature residents that are maturing, in their current homes. And a lot of Castle Hills homes are very large. So they're wanting to move to something that is smaller, more convenient, single level, smaller yard, lower maintenance. And so I reached out to the, to the Gardens of Castle Hills Assisted Living and Memory Care. I was surprised because I've driven by there several times, and then to notice that they're on 6 acres of land. So with this, I called and I was able to speak to the owner, and he mentioned that there are plans to build a number of units for assisted living, cottages for independent living. And what is really nice about this, about the change in hands, because y'all probably know it was Ventura at one time, it was Brookdale at another. So this person seems really vested in not only growing the Gardens of Castle Hills, but in being a part of the community of Castle Hills. And matter of fact, he's going to be, I've already mentioned that our business association group would be reaching out to him. So the next thing I want to talk about is what can we do as residents to keep our property values high? So number one, we got it made in the shade. We have location. We are centrally located, and it's just a perfect spot in San Antonio. We can get just about anywhere in 20 minutes. And then on top of that, I do brag about the fast response times of our police, fire, and EMS services. Unfortunately, I've had friends that have had to experience those, and they've all talked highly about how quickly the responses were. But now what we can do as far as residents, individual residents, is maintain our home and yard. So there's a lot of things that we can do on our own. I mean, cutting the grass, trimming trees, shrubbery, et cetera. That not only helps the appearance of your home, but it helps the overall appearance of your neighborhood. Even adding a fresh coat of paint, power washing, sidewalks, driveways, what have you, this all enhances your curb appeal. Now, something that's come up often with other realtors calling me because they know I live in Castle Hills is asking about foundation concerns. Well, it's no secret that there are many neighborhoods in San Antonio that have this concern. So my first word of advice is to seek professional structural engineers for opinions regarding any question or concern that you may have regarding your foundation. And the reason is they have no vested interest on what it's going to cost to fix. They're only looking at measuring, just taking giving you a full report on your home and letting you know what needs to be done, and maybe sometimes maybe nothing has to be done if the foundation is moved properly with the house. So one thing that is always recommended are gutters. That's preferable to keep water, rainwater going straight to the foundation, of your home. Now, they can be a little costly, but when you compare that to foundation repairs that I've experienced with my clients, it's always been looking at 20,000 plus and more. Now, so one thing I do want to share, and this is according to Sarah Gomez, structural engineer with geotechnical engineering. I have learned recently that the proper use of soaker hoses, now it can be depending on the type of soil we're on, but the typical use or the typical installation is to have your soaker hoses 6 inches away from the foundation and 6 inches deep. I was amazed to hear this because I've always seen folks that just lay the soaker hose all the way around the base of their house. So now this is not a permanent fix. So again, I strongly recommend that if there is a concern with foundation, to consult with a professional engineer. And they're a structural engineer. This is what they do. They take measurements in every room and they give you a full report and let you know what's necessary. Now, the fourth thing I was asked to speak on was buyer resistance to purchasing homes adjacent to businesses. And we've encountered this in the last several years of certain businesses and residents not being favorable upon them. So, the reason being, it could be the possibility of noise, extra traffic from patrons, delivery trucks, etc. Therefore, depending on the type of business and business hours, for example, from attorney's office, professional offices, CPAs, the typical hours of business operation is Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. So that can be less intrusive to homeowners and the neighborhood in general. So again, as I do experience people or buyers not wanting to have their backyard like right up to a very busy business or a very large business. And it's because they're concerned about, well, who's behind the fence? But again, it's always going to depend on the type. So in conclusion, the real estate market and the rules are constantly changing. We as realtors have to stay on top of the constant changes that the Texas Real Estate Commission provides and the Texas Association for Realtors. And this just all comes down the pipeline, and these are things that we just have to be on top of. For example, the most recent is when selling a home, if anyone owns security devices installed in their home, even such as Ring, they now have to be conveyed with the sale of the home, unless on the listing agreement that they list the security devices as an exclusion. So therefore, it's best to consult with a professional realtor when it comes to making a decision to sell your home. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you so much, Norma. We appreciate that. Questions, folks, please. Okay, I'm going to start you off, Norma.
Okay.
In the early part of your presentation, you were talking about apartments and the attitude toward apartments in the old days. I wonder if those attitudes are still in place, but I wonder maybe also if there's a bigger picture that ought to be seen, and that is perhaps the indirect result of, let's say there was an apartment complex of 50 folks, wherever it might be.
Right.
But doesn't that make it more attractive to a retail person or a restaurant or some sort of retail type business to have that concentration of people in a certain area within Castle Hills? I mean, the population comes up. Isn't that from an attraction of business standpoint a benefit?
I could see that being the case in our situation. So it would be good for business, but in our situation, and depending on the location of where those apartments might be, just to make sure, I mean, I live here, but just to absolutely make sure, I drove around Castle Hills. I'm like, where could we do that? Where could that even possibly be built? There aren't, at least from my opinion, which is I'm not a planning engineer, but just trying to look at the, not aesthetics, but just the logical location for apartments. I didn't see quite a few areas. I mean, the only one would be the commercial lot that is being sold on Military Highway, and it goes all the way across to Lock Hill Selma on the corner. But yeah, as far as having more people in the neighborhood, yes, I could see businesses, you know, seeing that as favorable, you know, more business, you know, just to more patrons for them, let's just say. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
You're welcome.
And I have another question if no one else has questions. Really out of curiosity more than anything else, I appreciate your conversation about helping our foundations remain stable. Are our foundations here in Castle Hills any more stable than other neighborhoods that you've seen over your career, Norma?
Well, I think it's common knowledge that the city of Alamo Heights and Terrell Hills have I'm just going to say a longer history of foundation concerns based on the type of soil that they were built on. And I'm getting this information from inspectors, other structural engineers as well, you know, that have mentioned, well, this is what it's built on, so things are going to happen. You know, the movement, the settling. And there's just about, I can tell you, I've sold all over the city, and the only place where I could say is not as susceptible to foundations when you go up into the Stone Oak area, and that's because it's a lot of rock. But as far as us being more stable, you know, it really depends on the streets. I know we're going to be working on several streets and doing improvements and repairs. So first of all, it's going to depend on the area that you're in. If it's really hilly, I mean, if you see buckling in the streets, things of that nature, then that area may be a little bit more susceptible. But again, it kind of boils down to, are you maintaining your yard properly? Are you trying to water it as evenly as possible? You know, there's just a ton of things that I've learned over the years on how to avoid issues with foundations. Sometimes in different areas, you know, it's more difficult than others, but because I mean, I get calls all the time and say, are there foundation problems in Castle Hills? And my answer is not as a whole. It just depends. And then again, it's going to depend on the maintenance of the homeowner on their yard and home.
Jack, if I may, I'd like to comment on your response regarding more density for the city to promote more business.
Of course, Barry.
I don't think that way. I think that Castle Hills and its location not being remote as others are is a pass-through with a large volume of traffic passing through Castle Hills. And I'd like to see Castle Hills a destination instead of a pass-through city, which it seems to be right now. And we're getting some really high-quality restaurants, Clementine, Sushi Hana. We're getting some restaurants that are bringing folks from far outside of Castle Hills. And I think that's more the key. You're talking about more affluent client base and things of that nature. I think that would be a better recipe for success, is trying to create a destination for the city, as the city of Castle Hills.
Couldn't agree more, Barry.
I agree also.
The question in my mind is if we invite more density, and of course the community hasn't commented on this yet. We're just talking here. But if there were to be a proposal for a project that's more dense up against a residential property, you know, we're likely to have some pushback. And of course, we saw that, Barry, you may recall, that little restaurant that wanted to go in on the corner of Manton and Military. My goodness, there was a lot of disagreement on that. The folks were very upset about that. And ultimately it got turned down, of course.
Right.
But then when that same property, which was an old bank building, was occupied by an attorney with maybe, you know, 8 or 10 folks there, as Norma pointed out, from 8 to 5, then the neighbors were just fine with that. So, you know, it's a tough question. I think I'm probably rambling a bit here, but the question of separation between something that's more dense, perhaps more dense than we've ever entertained, and our, you know, our beautiful single families, how do we approach that?
I still think they'd be more open to either a small garden home community, you know, possibly, you know, a 12, what they call a 12-plex townhome community. I've seen those go up in different areas of the city. But again, like you said, bottom line, it's going to be up to the residents.
I feel like this is an opportunity for us to create or suggest the processes where we can create the screening opportunities, where we create better buffers between different land uses so that we address those things that Normal's talked about. You know, this is a process where we can be creative. I know there were some issues after Bank of San Antonio and Pape Dawson were built that we had nothing to require screening, and the residents, you know, were up in arms because there are these tall buildings in their backyard, but we had no teeth as a city. So to me, that's like a learning opportunity for us as we go through this process.
That'd be a good idea, Amy.
Thank you guys so much for talking tonight. I've enjoyed what I've been able to listen to.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments, folks? Okay, well, our commercial real estate conversation with Ernest Brown and Cynthia Ellison will, you know, we're finishing a little bit early, but I would really prefer, if you all don't mind, to actually wait till 7:30, because we probably have people who are going to tune in at that time to hear specifically that conversation. So if you all don't mind, why don't we just take a little 15-minute break and we'll reconvene just about 7:30.
Hey, Jack, can I ask a quick question?
Of course, Barry.
We see how many participants are in Zoom. Can you tell us how many participants appear to be there at the council chambers? 0.
None tonight.
Okay, well, interesting.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Sure.
Barry, it is being recorded.
it is being recorded.
Yeah, so if
And
somebody is
presentation-
interested, they will have
yeah.
access to the information.
Right, and I don't know that we have the recordings from Tuesday night online yet, but they will be shortly. But as I mentioned, the presentations from Tuesday are on the website. And these will be as well. Okay, folks, why don't we convene? You're certainly welcome to stay or take a break, whatever you like, and we'll come back together at 7:30. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Like clockwork, huh? Yeah, it is interesting stuff. And there's so much negativity. But you know, Scott, I think I can see so many things that have been put off and put off. Seven servers, someone. They're all exposed. Come on, man. The problem, the reason that this has not been happening, the reason that streets are not being, I see not taking development. So don't build up. You can get a little bit more density, sensitively, not really taking on housing, but in those areas, maybe along Jackson Cellar, along Southern Blanco, perhaps, me, that would be a prudent thing. Help with income. We can take that. Let's see. All right. That's a great thought. Destination castle. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And we're seeing that as more and more little restaurants open up. Despite the difficulty in restaurants figure out how to reinvent stuff. But they did, and a lot of people, you know, do business there. Anyway, we'll take 5 here.
Hello, Barry. How are you doing? I think you're muted. Yeah. Ernest Brown talking.
I know. Hey, Ernest, it's been a while.
I know. How have you been?
Oh, you look the same. You haven't aged.
Just don't look at the gray, all right?
Okay. I've been good. I retired, fully retired about 1.5 years ago. My company was merged with Luna Architecture, and now he's renamed the firm Luna Middleman Architects.
Right, I saw that.
And I was there for a 3-year consulting agreement, and that went out, thank God, in March 1st of last year, along with the inception of the COVID. So I retired at that time.
Yeah, you have a blessed life there. That was perfect timing.
Must be.
Good. So you enjoying retirement?
Yes, I am enjoying. I'm still very active,
Yeah.
especially here in Castle Hills.
Good.
I'm speaking up a lot tonight because I'm on this committee, the Comprehensive Plan Committee, and I'm chairman of the Architectural Review Board for the city of Castle Hills. So I'm full of opinions, good or bad, I'm full of opinions. Hey, Cynthia, how are you?
Hey, Barry. Nice to talk to you again so
I know.
quickly, since we just visited multiple times.
I think yesterday,
Yeah.
maybe the day before.
Nice to talk to you again.
Yeah.
Is that on
So
the
this,
Fort Foundation?
I listened to the residential. It was interesting. Especially the part she talked about, of trying to, places to do anything else. I mean, because everything is pretty much filled out in Castle Hills.
Well, that's problematic. That's been a problem, but there's no reason why we can't up the image of the commercial that we already do have by bringing in some highly favorable types of tenant mix.
That's right.
That's
That's
what
right.
you're here for. That's what you and Ernest are here for, to give us the.
We can do it. We can do it.
Well,
Definitely.
We don't have all the answers, but we'll at least give you some opinions.
That'll be good.
Really. I think it's 7:30. Oh,
Jack,
two more minutes. Two
Couple
more
minutes
minutes.
more. Patience now.
Okay. 2 more minutes.
Cynthia, I'm a stickler for time. This is Jack. Thanks for
Oh, hi,
joining us.
Jack.
Sure, hi.
You look lonely there all by yourself.
yes.
Yeah, well, Scott's here with me, but it's just us two holding the fort here at City Hall.
Oh, I see. I see now.
Yeah.
Hey, Scott.
Tuesday night, we kicked off our speaker forums and we had 10 folks here in
Oh.
City Hall. So we weren't quite sure what was going to happen tonight, but the idea was to have it all Zooming. So I think that message finally got across.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. But anyway, I think it's close enough. So why don't we get started with the commercial real estate portion of our discussion this evening. And folks, we are very, very fortunate to have with us two of for San Antonio's true real estate, I don't know, folks
Legends.
who have been around a long, long time. Very, very experienced. What'd you say, Ernest?
I said they're legends.
Legends. Well, yeah, I think that's a fair statement. Ernest and I met back in the 1980s, and we lost touch for a while, but very recently have been back in touch. So he's a great guy, a great resource, and knows about just about anything there is to know about commercial real estate in the San Antonio area. And he's invited Cynthia Ellison to join him. Cynthia, we understand you're a retail expert with many, many years of experience.
Yes, that's true. Many, many, many. I know. Yes.
Well, here, that's more and more common around here. But anyway, it's great to have you both, and we've challenged you with to give us some, I guess, observations, and then maybe suggest some opportunities for us here in Castle Hills. And Norma gave a nice background to the residential side. So if you guys would be good enough to continue in whatever way, whether Ernest would like to chat first or Cynthia, however you all want to do it, please feel free to go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go first. And just by way of introduction, I'm Ernest Brown. I do investment sales, represent developers looking to develop properties, industrial, office, apartments. I've been doing this since 1984 in San Antonio. Cynthia and I have actually worked together side by side for almost 20 years or better.
Right.
She's only been in the business just a couple of years longer than that. I'm not allowed to say how long. I'll get in trouble. At any rate, I just want to let you all know, first, we're going to say some things you may not necessarily like, but we're trying to just be brutally honest and tell you what the perceptions are in the market and some of the things you have to overcome. But first, I want to start out by saying I go through Castle Hills 2 to 4 times a day. Today, I went through Castle Hills 6 times. So I work out at the lawn. I live over by North Star. Castle Hills since I was a little kid. I had relatives that lived there. So I'm very familiar with Castle Hills. I really like the city, and to put it even further, my wife and I are looking to move to Castle Hills. So we're looking for houses and fixing ours up. So with that, I wanted to start out by telling you sort of what we did is we got a group of brokers together, sort of a focus group. And we started asking people, first off, what is your perception of Castle Hills? And so please understand, a lot of these may be changing, but the perception is still out there because outsiders don't know what's happening. So the first guy I talked to said, yeah, grumpy old people and trees. The next person said, well, it's a speed trap. And then he said, I wonder if people bypass the city because of that. You know, it's restrictive. There are lots of NIMBYs not in my backyard, which really makes it difficult to do anything. And I understand what you all are up against when you look at that. And the city is not considered pro-business. And when I mean that, it takes entirely too long for your approval process very often. I think you need to streamline those processes, especially building permits and inspections. Help businesses, as soon as they sign that lease, are starting to have to spend money. They want to get through that process as quick as they can so that they can open, right? And allowing them that benefit is going to help your tenants that are basically your tenants for the city of Castle Hills. So some of the restrictions you all have, like temporary signage. Allow somebody to put up a temporary sign that says coming soon, Chick-fil-A, or whatever it is that's taking that Jack in the Box up there at the north end of Northwest Military. It shows progress. It shows action. It lets people know what's coming. And it makes people feel like, wow, that space was empty for only a couple months and there's already somebody's taking it. And right now, it just looks like a building that somebody's trying to figure out what to do with because it still has a for sale sign on it and nothing else. And I would bet you anything those guys would love to be able to do that. Because again, it kind of shows the neighborhood as well as the tenant an opportunity. So one of the things we also heard, and this is, you know, a terrible thing to say, but we had a couple brokers tell us that they will bypass Castle Hills and look in the city of San Antonio and look around the city of Castle Hills before they get into Castle Hills, simply because the process is too restrictive. And that's good. I mean, you want to invite people in and have them be able to immediately say, yeah, Castle Hills is going to listen to us. They're going to do some programs. And I know that you all are going to hear Gsc Coburn on Saturday. That's a city to try and emulate, in all candidness. To be more successful in what you're trying to do, I think you just have to remove business barriers. But at the same time, you have to realize that a lot of people said, well, Castle Hills, and if you asked about inside the loop, a large number of people were like, Castle Hills, inside the loop, you know, and they don't think about it. But you may not realize that 65% of your residents live south of the loop. They have a 25% lower average income. And so you have 2 different demographic cities, right side by side, split by 410. And one of the things we talked about was, how do you help the guys on the south side? And it may be different than you do on the north side, because you've got different demographics, different residents that are purchasing different type items. So let's see, Fortune, yeah. You need 2 approaches. That's basically what I was going to say. So, and as Barry Middleman said earlier, we consider Castle Hills a bypass town. You drive through it just as I do every day. I go to Castle Hills quite a bit because, you know, you have a lot of great restaurants and your accessibility, as was discussed earlier, is great because you're very central. So when we look at Castle Hills, we want you to kind of think about what your strengths are and how you capitalize on them. So one is obviously people consider Castle Hills a safe neighborhood. Okay. It also comes along with the nomenclature of a speed trap. Candidly, I wouldn't let that worry you too much. But I know Cynthia will have a comment on that later. You have very quiet neighborhoods, which is great. And your restaurants are clearly supported not by your population, because you only have 4,000 people there. Your restaurants are supported because people are coming from everywhere else in, but a lot of that's in the evening. So you have to think about what other services those people that are coming there in the evenings may want. And a lot of those businesses may have already closed. So what services are there that can cater to those people that are coming in for dinner and then keep them there? And as was said earlier, you're very centrally located, which is fantastic. So as we sat there and had our little round table, Cynthia and Cynthia, what I think are some great ideas. So I'm gonna let her address those right now.
Well, one of the things that we talked about was identity, and that is people cut through Castle Hills to go somewhere or maybe to eat, but they don't really know when they're in Castle Hills and when they're leaving. So I was thinking if you do a really nice, you know, brick or limestone or something, welcome to Castle Hills, put landscaping in there, you know, color, change your flowers out, you know, depending on the season, you know, put something for Christmas, whatever, make it so you know the minute you come into Castle Hills. Now I know you've got, like Ernest said, it's almost like two cities, south of 410 and north of 410. So maybe you need two of those, but I think that's a good investment. And then when you leave Castle Hills, you know, thanks for visiting Castle Hills, come back soon, something like that. So, you know, when you come in and out. And another way to identify yourself would be, it's like Monte Vista does, they have a different color on their street signs. So, you know, immediately, say you use blue or brown, whatever, you know, immediately when it's a Castle Hill street and when you're out and you're in San Antonio. So that, I mean, I know those things take money and take time to do, but there are small things that would create identity for you. And I was thinking to make some community events to bring people together that live in Castle Hills, that people want to come and live there. And for example, you could do, I know you're getting the little wine jazz place there, close to Barry's house, West Avenue and Lock Hill. But I was thinking you could maybe have a jazz festival, you know, every 6 months where all the people in Castle Hills and obviously out of Castle Hills too could come and listen to music and maybe sit outside, have some food trucks there. You could do the same thing with farmers market. You could have some kind of a events like arts and craft festival where, you know, that to bring people into Castle Hills. But I think you need to create more identity for yourselves because, you know, people that know Castle, it's a beautiful place. The trees are beautiful. It's safe. And we pointed out all those things, but it still doesn't have a lot of identity. So I think those would make a difference in people wanting to be there. I know I have a center in in Hollywood Park that I lease, and they have some electronic signs, and they'll put, you know, when there's a new business, they'll welcome them. They'll also come and do a ribbon cutting and, you know, help promote the new businesses. And that would be really good if you could do that, because you want people to have a really good start when they finally decide to come to Castle Hills and open their business there. They need help and they need support, and anything that you guys can do besides what Ernest said is helping them get through the planning process and the approvals and the inspections quickly so they can get open. Just so you know, you typically have so long to get your space open. Once you sign a lease, your rent's going to start, depending on the condition of the space, in 30 days or 60 days or whatever. You can negotiate, and whether you're open or not, they have to start paying rent. So they're going to be in a hurry to get through the process, get their construction done and get open. And then once they're open, if you could help them, you know, with advertise to the community. If you add an electronic sign somewhere, welcome the new business to the area. I mean, just create a lot of presence for Castle Hills because it's a really beautiful place. And like everyone's been saying, it's so centrally located and it's a desirable place to live. I know you don't have a lot of small homes there. Inside the loop, but outside the loop, it would be nice if you could get some condos or some high-end, or some small houses even, a little neighborhood. If you could carve out a place with like 1,500 to 2,000 square foot houses. The people that are living in Castle Hills and want to stay there, but they don't want their big home and they don't want to have an acre or 2-acre lot to have to maintain, but they want to stay in Castle Hills. I think we need to create some opportunities for people to live in a smaller, 1-story, safe home. It can be high end. It can still be high end in price per foot. I don't know if the residential brokers are still on here, but they could tell you, what you could sustain. But it could, but something smaller that the older residents, so they can stay in your community. You don't want to lose them. And then that places that their kids and grandkids could live even. So some places that are affordable for their families so they can move there too. So I know that's a whole nother story and Barry touched on it earlier, create, more places affordable and easier for seniors too. So I was thinking also, I don't know how many bus stops are in Castle Hills, but I was thinking maybe you could cooperate with maybe the Boy Scouts, because I know Eagle Scouts have to do a lot of community to get their Eagle Scout. Maybe do something with them to beautify the buses, put some nice benches or some art or something like that to make it a pleasant pace, to wait and identify it. Hey, look at this nice bus stop. We're in Castle Hills, to identify you and separate you from San Antonio. I have a whole list of things and I'll be happy to write them. I also have a list of, I can give you lots of things. I think I ran all the vacancies in the centers. Most of your centers are really pretty full. I know you have a 2,300 and that's the center that Rick Carduner owns there where Clementine's is. Another 10 at the eye doctor is going to move out. So there's going to be another 2,300 feet in that center. And there were several places in the center where the wine is at Soho, where they're going to open their wine jazz. There are several vacancies in that center. So that's partially maybe the landlord. I don't know. That's what I've heard. Some issues with the landlord there. But I mean, keeping your centers full and vibrant, so you want to have good, just getting a pro-business atmosphere. So people want to move there. They know they can get in and out fast. I mean, that will make a big difference on people wanting to move to Castle Hills. Yeah. I lost you, Ernest. There you
I know
are.
I muted myself so you wouldn't hear me sneezing. Other things we talked about, and I thought about earlier. One, the Boy Scouts is something that you all could really capitalize on. I'm not sure what the relationship is between Castle Hills and the Boy Scouts, but that's obviously one of your largest tracts of land. And if you're going to have farmers markets, if you were going to have a car show, if you were going to, have pickleball tournaments that you could set up, you want to create, and Cynthia is very right when she says you need to create an image for yourself, because Castle Hills has an image that's thought of by a lot of different people and it's not very consistent. And actually today it's not as accurate as it used to be. So I think that create your own image, your atmosphere is something that's very important. I like the idea of changing your signs. I like the idea of the entry. You'd have to figure out how to do that on the south side in that area. But that's what sort of sets you apart. When you start sending out announcements to the city, hey, we're going to do farmers markets, or hey, we've got, car shows. Guys, car nuts are car nuts, and they will come from all over the city if they've got a good parking lot where they can show off their you know, latest 1956, whatever. So another thing we thought about, and I think is important, is when you go online, your all's website is not real friendly. If you could simplify some online services, redo that website so that it was more inviting to somebody, you know, be more open to quickly setting up meetings, somebody to leave a message, get back to you. Because those type things are what is very often the first impression. You know, so tenants very often without their broker will start pecking around and looking at cities to try and get a feel for them. And your website presence, I think if you beef that up, would make people understand a little bit more about who you are, understand the city, understand what services are there, and then be able to put in inquiries to hopefully get feedback. And then once you've engaged them, that's the real key. Because remember when I said earlier, some brokers, companies just say, well, let's go look around first and then we'll come in if we have to. But if you're quick and easy and engage them, that very often is what you have to do to sort of capture their attention and then get over any hurdles that they may perceive to be the case. So I like the idea of supporting your existing businesses. You know, there's some things, again, the City of Commerce will cover next week, and they do a great job at that. And you'll see, let's see. So next thing, and this is what I'm going to call responsible development. I think people have kind of touched around it. But to me, responsible development is how are you going to keep your aging seniors who've lived in Castle Hills? My partner, his father has lived in Castle Hills his entire life. He's retiring. He'd love to stay in Castle Hills. He can't take a yard. He can't take care of anything anymore. So I think you need to find ways to keep your residents, okay? And I think that if you had the right plan and approach your citizens with, look, there's going to be a way for you now to have a semi-retirement location here. So let me take the 4.72 acres of land that's on Winston Drive between Lock Hill, Selma, and Northwest Military, right by Winston Hill Shopping Center. It's 4.7 acres. It's been vacant forever. I understand it's recently gone under contract. Personally, I understand or heard they may be doing, you know, townhouses or something like that. That is a horrible use for that property, guys. If you would allow them to go with a 5-story pedestal building with a parking garage in the middle, maybe a concierge service, you could put in, call it 100 units. And I would wager Barry can tell you might be able to put more if you went 5 stories, because you've got 4.7 acres of land. You go up with 100 units at $350,000 a piece. You've got $35 million in tax base. That gives you another $180,000 to use for your city services, whether that's more police force, car, signs for the whole town, so that you can create your own identity. But you have to think about that. That is an amenity that your citizens want and need. And I wager if you polled all of them and said, if we had a nice retirement community here, would you be willing to buy a condominium and move into it? So now parents, grandparents move into a condo. They keep in the city. So they're going to go to all these restaurants. They also increase your need for medical services, because a lot of times you have to have a density of people to get those services that you want. And it allows the families now to possibly, hey, my kids and grandkids are going to move into the house because I want to give it to them and I'm buying my condo. And when you think about the impact that makes to your community, long-term, you've really created more of a community than you had before. And now people from different areas around Castle Hills are all coming together. And I think that is what should be done with that 4.7 acres. You have 2000 Northwest Military and 2002 Northwest Military. Guys, those are awful looking office buildings. We at one point in time had a buyer for those, and this was several years ago, approached Castle Hills about things that we could do. And we were shut down so quickly about anything that could be done on that site because it has a neighbor behind it that we just shrugged our shoulders and walked off. You know, the investor did not buy it. That property, candidly, somebody should buy, bulldoze. And again, maybe it's only 3 stories. Maybe you tier it so to the back, or you put up a vine wall so the neighbors don't see it. But that's another phenomenal location to increase your curb appeal, get rid of that old schlocky office building, and go in with another 40, 50, 100 units. you know, and you do that, and now all of a sudden you've got 200 houses that are freed up in Castle Hills for new families to move in, and you've increased your tax base by potentially $40–50 million. And you provided a service and a benefit to your community, in particular the guys that lived there their whole life and want to stay.
Right.
Yeah, so-
And shop and eat in the restaurants. You're going to help everyone who's in Castle Hills and they want an office there close to their house. You know, I think it's a win-win for everyone, putting a little density in there.
but density that serves your neighbors, your community.
Yeah.
And,
It's-
you know, so
right.
I wouldn't look to try and do low-end apartments. I wouldn't want to do apartments, candidly. I would rather say, no, we want a nice luxury condo project. And in order to make that feasible for somebody, you're going to have to go up a few stories. But that property is perfect because it looks over office buildings on one side, a retail center on the other, a retail center on the other, and a parking lot. You've got that one little house that has the Alamo looking crest on it, caddy corner, but I don't see that as a significant impact to anybody, and something you should really consider. And a good example of this is Alamo Heights for years had a very bad reputation. People couldn't get things done. There were, you know, old buildings along Broadway. People were trying to figure out what to do with them. And here recently, if you look at the project they built, the name slips me right now. Cynthia, do you remember it? Austin Highway and
I don't know the name of it. I don't know the name of it. It's really was hard for them to get that done, but I think it's a win-win. All those people that live in those apartments are going to be able to walk to the restaurants, walk to the shops. I mean, it was a smart thing that they finally allowed those apartments to be built.
Yeah, and I think that's a 4 or 5 story with retail on the bottom.
Yeah.
And it
Mhm.
looks nice. I mean,
Mhm.
you need to understand not to be fearful of what we're going to call multifamily. And I would say condos for Castle Hills as opposed to apartments, because they don't have to look bad. They don't have to be your slums. They can be some very nice high-end buildings that I think your community truly needs.
Like
get those people-
Like Walter Embry.
Yeah, get those guys out of my neighborhood so I can go buy a house, guys. Come on. Okay. And let's see. Yeah, some people have already discussed this. Your house lots are large, you know, and I think that in some special instances, to look at 3 or 4 of those large lots and figure out if they could be put together and allow somebody to go in there. Maybe it's, you know, a nice either townhouse development or something that has 8 units on an acre and not 1. You know, it doesn't demonstrably change the neighborhood, but it allows people to live there because you have to have some density. I mean, the reality is you already have more retail, restaurants, and services than Castle Hills, a population of $4,000 could ever support. You're able to have that there because of your central location. It's quick and easy for me to come from my house in 8 minutes. I'm at Sushihana. I love it, you know, so, but I need to think of other reasons to be there. I would love to go to a farmer's market on Wednesdays or Saturdays. But I think those type of events are where you're going to create your sense of community as well as identification to let people know when they're actually in Castle Hills and when they leave. Yeah, and as I was saying earlier, there are certain services that you may want that require a larger population. But the reality is, unless you all do something to change it, your older citizens are going to move out. And eventually the demographics are going to change. And when those demographics change, then maybe you won't have as many NIMBYs and people like that are going to try and oppose development. So I think it's really going to take some gumption on your all's part to try and push some things through that should make sense and that you should be able to sell to the citizens, like a 5-story condo project that's high end. And some things you may not, but you're going to have to try, or I can assure you it's never going to happen. And I think that's pretty much it. Oh yeah, like one guy said, I asked him about it. He goes, "Did you hear that they had Soho going in there?" And that was just a huge surprise. People, they're like, "Really? Castle Hills allowed that?" You know, that's the type of reaction you don't want to have. You want to advertise in the San Antonio paper, "Castle Hills just landed Soho, you know, come see it." So at any rate, that's about our 25 minutes of diatribing. So now we'll open it up to questions and thoughts. And Cynthia, is there anything else I missed initially?
No, I think we got it. I mean, I think the create identity, you know, try to create more community, try to, put some more residences that are smaller for this, the people that are senior and want to stay in the area. I think those are pretty much the main things. Make it be more business friendly. And I'm not saying you're not business friendly, but you've got to make it smooth and fast to do things. So maybe you want the businesses, but you've got to make it easy for them to get through the process, make it faster.
And again, things like coming soon signs only show success
Yeah.
and progress. They're not negative.
You
And they're
think-
temporary. I mean, a month, they're coming soon, and a month after they open, now open, welcome them to the community, get people to come in, try to advertise for them as much as you can, create interest, and you want people to want to go to those new businesses and make them successful from day one. And then they'll tell their friends and they'll want to come where their friends are successful.
I wanted to say one thing, ask one quick question because it's going to slip my mind otherwise. I've noticed some of the success of other cities have been stimulated by an economic development commission or an economic development director. Is Castle Hills too small a community to justify that type of entity?
Hollywood Park has one, Barry, and they're about the same size, I think. I think they have about the same number of residents that you have.
Who is
And
that?
Hollywood Park.
Oh, they have an
I
economic.
know Andy Moon is on that committee. Right now, he's an attorney, but he's helping me right now get a new business in there that's a good business for them, about a 10,000 foot retail tenant. They want to do a 10-year lease, and I need help getting it approved because it's not one of the uses on their list of accepted uses. It's a restaurant, family restaurant, billiards, and they do have alcohol. So restaurant is on it, and alcohol is on there, but it doesn't address billiards. So anyway, economic development's trying to help us get that approved without having to go through a special use permit. So yeah, they have it there.
Yeah, I think, Barry, you have to understand what that person is going to try to accomplish, how much land you have really for development or redevelopment. I wouldn't think that you have time for a full-time marketing person to go out there and beat the bushes, but I do think you can designate somebody on your website who is with maybe the city services that, says, contact this person as, for economic development opportunities, et cetera. That, again, that's sort of that welcome platform on your website that allows somebody to do it. I'm not sure on the budget that you have, which I think is like 7 million or something, that you have enough to pop a whole economic development group in there. I could tell you this though, I mean, you could surely try it for a couple of years. If you do, sign entries, if you redo all your street signs, and you all of a sudden create an image and you have that person on board for a 2-year stint, that person can go out there and really focus on making a splash. And I'll also say, and go back to Cynthia's idea of a community billboard. A community billboard is a great way to let people know that you are a community. So for me, I'd put it right there in front of IBC Bank at West Avenue, Northwest Military. You have something that says, welcome Soho, or maybe it's Clementine's is running a 10% special that you can sell ads on it. You only advertise businesses that are in Castle Hills, no one else. And everybody has an opportunity to put something up there on a monthly basis or so for free. And that really supports your tenants, and your tenants know it and they see it. When cities do that, they go, wow, because you really have to be a partner, if you would, with your tenants. And I tell people all the time, if you're investing in a retail center, you don't own the retail center. You own part of every retail business in that center, and you want to make sure they're successful. So you as a landlord have to work with them to make sure they're successful. And I think that's the same for a city, taking care of its current occupants, tenants, as well as citizens.
Jack, while we have Cynthia and Ernest here, would you want to discuss your Business Alliance and how it interacts with some of the things they're discussing. I haven't been a part of that, but evidently y'all have been meeting with business owners and have been able to get some reading on their appraisals of Castle Hills.
Sure, Barry.
We did that just to get some ideas of, people's concept. I called multiple people, including Barry, because I knew Barry lived there, just to get their feel and, what they think is wrong. Several people pointed out, of course, speed trap. One person told me that Clementine's has an issue with the police giving tickets in front of the space because the lights, they're colored lights that the policemen are running, is interrupting people having expensive, nice dinners. So
Yeah,
I
and we
don't
would
know. I
take-
mean, that's
yeah.
a minor thing that could be corrected by them not running the lights while they're given the ticket, maybe, or pulling them somewhere else, not right in front of the restaurant. Just a little thing, but it's a concept, and multiple people brought that up to me.
So Jack,
Well,
No, but Rick was one of them.
yeah. That's good.
Don't say I said that. Yeah, it's a sore subject, but anyway.
well, I'd like to thank both Ernest and Cynthia for all of these terrific ideas. You guys are really a fountain of terrific things, and we will take them all forward. Excuse me. And, taking care of business is a terrific idea. And actually, a couple of us on council are really trying to help out with that. We very recently established what we call a Castle Hills Business Association. And we had our first event last Thursday evening, and we had about 35 businesses come and munch on some tacos and drink some margaritas. So we had a
Oh,
grand old time.
nice.
Yeah, it was a nice event. And
Yeah.
hopefully it kicked off, the beginning of a really nice association that we hope in time will give businesses the opportunity to help one another and support one another and be heard by the city. The city can listen to just the kind of things that you guys are telling us about. And this would be a good forum for that, about the speeding up of permits and how difficult it is. And I've heard my share of stories too. The fellows down on Northwest Military at Catalyst Physical Therapy had an incredible time trying to get their inspections done. It was pretty unreasonable from what I understand. But anyway, the points are well taken. And at least on that score, we are making progress, and hopefully it will really catch on and be something that's a benefit to all the businesses as well as the city over time.
I think that's a great idea, because those businesses they'll get to know each other, and then they'll spread the word, that Castle Hills is supporting the businesses and helping, and that will bring more business to the area too. So
Yeah.
I think that's a really great start.
Well, thank you, Cynthia. It is a start. We got to start somewhere. And
Yeah, I know. I feel embarrassed we didn't mention that. We should have said that's something to do. Oh, well.
Yeah.
Jack, as I mentioned, Barry, did you have a question?
I was just going to say, we've tried some of your suggestions. They have a Fiesta arts fair,
Oh,
arts
nice.
and crafts fair every Fiesta. My wife has exhibited her artwork there and has determined that they're not really as much Castle Hills residents as people are coming over there thinking it's a garage sale or it's a flea market. We haven't put enough emphasis on the quality of the services within our arts and crafts, so people will be able to come and really find some real treasures and know about it, instead of people coming from poor income areas thinking they're going to get something really inexpensive. We've also had a farmer's market, and it was every Saturday, and for a while it looked pretty active to me. For whatever reason, I don't know if it was the landlord or what happened, but it disappeared as well. So I don't know what it is that we have to do to get enough stimulation in interest in this to be successful.
Maybe the billboard, that Ernest was talking about, farmers market with the sign, electronic sign or whatever, that's what Hollywood Park uses, but to advertise that you're going to have the art show or you're going to have the farmer's market. Don't forget the farmer's market's Wednesday evening or whatever, Saturdays, whenever it is, so that people see it when they drive up and down Northwest Military, to remind them that there's an event that they want to go to. I mean, that would publicize it, and that you would get people not just from Castle Hills, but anyone. There's a lot of traffic on Northwest Military.
Yeah, the activities are what are going to bring people in. And then as they look around, they go, hey, I need something for my pet. So they'll stop at the PetSmart or something, or they'll drive through. That traffic is, and it creates that sense of community. Sometimes, unfortunately, like a farmer's market, you have to stay with it for a while. And again, if you had an electronic billboard in front of IBC, I would have known that you had one. I didn't ever realize you had one or where it was. I go to one all the way down here on Oblate in the Almas Basin. But I'd rather go to Castle Hills.
It was right behind IBC Bank in that shopping center.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, that'd be a good spot for it. It's just sticking with things. You know, you may not, you have a lost leader. You do something for 3 to 6 months and it doesn't take, but eventually it will take, because you keep doing it and people say, hey, that's there, and they remind you. But I think having some sort of something that announces events, what you're doing, successes, new businesses, town, all those, everybody's going to love being able to see and feel like they're part of a community. It says, this is what's happening.
Mhm.
No, those are great ideas. And I think probably one of the more challenging ones is the idea about increased density. Only because of, in so many of our areas, the commercial property is literally right up against a residential property. And there's no buffer whatsoever. And they're not very deep properties. Those properties on Northwest Military are, you know, even the commercial properties are pretty skinny and
Yeah.
not a lot of depth. And well, Ernest, you mentioned the idea of a wall. Maybe that's a solution. But I think based on what we've seen in the past, we're going to have to really understand very well and market very well ideas like that, because I think they have a lot of merit. And actually, in my position as a councilman here for a little bit over a year, I've seen many things. And of course, the most obvious thing is streets and drainage, but I've seen many things that have been expenditures, capital expenditures, which have been put off and put off and put off. And my suspicion is, and you know, I don't have the data, but my suspicion is it's been put off because they don't have the money. And so these are ideas which can generate more money and make for a more diverse,
Right.
and more of a destination. Ernest, I think you used that term, and Barry used the term in the conversation about residential real estate. But if we could become a destination, actually at one time we were, early in our history, we were a destination. We were the place to live, you know, in the 50s and 60s. But if we could get back to that, it seems to me that would be a great thing.
Yeah, I think I would just challenge you to watch that 4.7 acre tract. It's a perfect tract for what we're talking about. And if you all let it become townhouses or something like apartments, I think you're missing probably the only one opportunity you truly have in the city of Castle Hills to do something like that that's not affecting a neighbor or a neighborhood. So anyway, we remain available always for questions. As I mentioned to Jack, I'll send you all our notes, which I've expanded on a couple times since I've gone over them a couple times, because we want you to have that, and then, you know, we remain as resources. So, but any other questions or anything anybody would like to discuss or ask us?
Good evening. This is Theresa Casey, and I live inside the loop. Regarding the ribbon cutting for businesses, the Castle Hills Women's Club arranges that with the mayor. And it was fairly active until COVID, and then, you know, we're trying to resurrect that. But they would coordinate with new businesses in the area and do the photos and the welcoming. I think one of the other problems with that is we don't really have a newspaper where you can highlight that, but if we've got a Facebook page or something like that, that's one way to do it. Thank you.
Yeah, no,
Oh,
that's
that's so great. I didn't know about that. That's really good to know. You want to make sure that the new tenants know that you have that available. So when maybe you give them something when they go to get their building permit or their certificate of occupancy, or at some point, so that they know to take advantage of that, the welcome committee.
And I don't know, ma'am, if there is a process, a formal process. Our president, Judy Crawford, does a lot of volunteering at City Hall. And so it may be that just serendipity, or she's there, but that's something I can just mention to her, that perhaps we need to formalize that when they get a permit to start a business, that they get on our list of calling to see if they're interested in a ribbon cutting.
Right.
yes.
I think
good.
that'd be great.
If I may chime in, what happens when businesses do apply for their permits, they're put on a list. And then, because I was actually the liaison between new businesses and setting up the ribbon cutting with the Castle Hill Club. And they're asked at that time, would you like ribbon cutting? And so from that point, then we start scheduling, we talk to them, see when they would like, when they're going to be ready for the most part. And then we, and so most of them do take advantage of the ribbon cutting, because when we do them, we have pictures taken, we put it on the Castle Hills Facebook, and you know, just let them, okay, we've got a new business in town, here they are, they provide these services, attach pictures. But I think maybe still the billboard, you know, maybe reminding people, don't forget about the new business. You know, I think that would be a nice addition. I do want to add regarding permits and such, that's not, the difficulty is not just with businesses, Jack. I've also had complaints from people moving into San Antonio, into Castle Hills, wanting to do renovations, and they've run into the same situation. Difficulty in getting the permits, getting the inspection, and so forth. One thing I do want to share regarding the south end of Castle Hills, or the south of 410. And I'm sorry if y'all weren't on earlier. I provided the residential real estate portion of this.
Yes, I heard.
Okay.
Yeah, I was on there. I was on too.
Okay. Well, what I didn't have was specific numbers, but just so you know, the top 7 homes, well, I should say just one below, because we did have one sell on Fox Hall, but other than that, 7 homes, the most recent homes that sold were on the south end of 410, and they range from 525 to 800,000. So we are getting people in here that are willing to spend money on the large homes and yards, and the value is there. And all of those 7 homes, like I said, that's just the most recent.
Yeah.
It is beautiful down there. I have a friend who lives there, Robbie and Raymond Casey.
Yes. I
They
mean,
live on Cass Hills Drive. They have a beautiful home there. It's very pretty. And my old manager used to live, I don't even remember the name of the street, Thompson, and he raised his kids there in Castle Hills in the south of 410. It's beautiful there too.
Yeah, well, that's actually where Castle Hills Estates is located.
Right,
Okay.
right. And you sort of have a bifurcated residence down there as well, because you really have a northern half in the Castle Hills Estates, and then you have the southern half that backs up to Jackson Keller, Vance Jackson.
Right.
That
Jackson Keller
is significantly different. And that's, I think, what draws. I mean, if we did polygons around that in the north, I think we would see a significantly different bifurcation of those 2 populations. But right now it's 25% different. It may end up being 30 or so if you were to exclude Castle Hills Estate from that south part. You're right. And yeah,
I will say that homes have been selling for high value even further down from 410, where you see the lower, but actually they're on the rise too, is on the other side of Honeysuckle.
right. Yeah. And there's a lot of gentrification. I've gone through there, and people are buying houses, fixing them up, making them look nicer.
Matter of fact, there was a listing that came on just yesterday on Townview for 525. So it's coming up.
Oh yeah, no question, no question.
But I do agree that maybe we do have a large sign, large brick sign at Cass Hills and Blanco. And then we do have on the lights, we have different things, you know, but I think if we had more of those around the city would be really nice.
Yes.
Well, you know, another signage opportunity might be those giant electric signs that are on 410. I think there's 3 or 4 of them. And those are actually, I don't know if they're owned by the city, but we generate income from them. And according to the city manager, we are entitled to a certain number of hours per month of our own advertising on those big signs.
Oh,
And
great.
so,
That's a good place to put the new tenants.
Absolutely.
The
Absolutely.
new restaurants or,
yeah,
yeah.
yep. So I think that's something we need to pursue as well. But that great thought though, you guys.
So this was the one section of our forum that I'm going to probably speak more on than any, because I've spent my life in commercial real estate and architecture, and something that's I've brought up several times, and I haven't really gotten any kind of a particular opinion of, and that is, I know that it's a very high-end area of town on the east side, on the west side of West Avenue, in the Foxhall and that area over there, beautiful homes back in there. But on the east side of West Avenue, you've seen some things crop up. You've seen that little office garden park that went in. You're seeing other buildings that actually are doing commercial development, are reusing maybe even houses into commercial use, and it's so helter-skelter that it kind of still looks rural instead of commercial, and I wanted to see what y'all thought of the potential, since we're landlocked and we have so little opportunity for commercial development, what you think about that side of West Avenue becoming more of a commercial destination between Northwest Military and 410.
I think it'd be fine, Barry, because I mean, those kind of tenants are like office tenants, their destination anyway. So, I mean, that you're still right there off Military and close to 410. So the accessibility to that is really good. You've got a lot of schools there. I mean, to keep traffic really slow, which some people don't like to go slow. But other than that, really, it's not me. I always go the speed limit or less. But I think that's a good spot for commercial.
Yes, I would agree with Cynthia there, Barry. And a lot of that commercial has filled up nicely and it looks good. And I think if you compare that to your 2002 Northwest Military, the product on the east side of West Avenue, some of those are nice, they look good, and they kind of complement the neighborhood.
Do you see a market for more office buildings here, Ernest, Cynthia?
Well, there's no reason not to close to the airport and close to shopping, a lot of good restaurants. There's absolutely no reason why people wouldn't want to have their offices there. So I think office development would do well.
I would be reluctant to do spec development of office, just because if you look at the North Central market, you've got a tremendous amount of vacancy. It's probably the hardest hit of the office markets in San Antonio from a high-rise standpoint. What I do think you're going to find is that you will have businesses, a small attorneys group, an engineering firm, whether it's a psychological practice group, physical therapy, home health, those type people, and the medical services that want to be in a decent demographic area that can be reached accessibly, will want to buy and build their own facilities. So you're really sort of making land available. I mean, we had a presentation today by Live Oak, Converse, and I'm forgetting who else it was. Universal City at the CCIM chapter luncheon. And one of the things all of those towns said is, we are trying to buy strategic tracts in our city for the purpose of putting them back on the market for commercial development. And that to me is a very interesting thing when the cities are going so far as to spend $400,000 or $500,000, buy something, clean it up, put it on the market, and then be able to attract that user that you may want.
That's exactly what I was thinking of is I don't think the people that residentially live on West Avenue, facing West Avenue on that side, have got to be that thrilled having a home on a commercial, heavily trafficked street. Is if there was some way to motivate some of those folks to sell their property in order to turn it into commercial zoning instead of residential, they may get enough return on selling their property just for its commercial value to give them a better opportunity to be more within the city, moving somewhere that might be a little bit more quiet and more enticing.
Yes.
But we've got to have kind of a movement toward doing that. And I know that there's a lot of homes backed up to the commercial there. I don't know how much complaining there is, but I do think that the city of San Antonio, when they have commercial backing up to residential, with those two diverse zoning, the city is that not only has to be an opaque wall, but there has to be a 15-foot landscape buffer on the commercial side of that wall. And there's even definition of types of trees and greenery which you put in. And there's like a 35 foot building setback. So they're getting those commercial buildings further away from that property line and giving it a little bit of a landscape buffer and something that would be kind of a little bit of a assistance and aid to some of those residential properties that may not otherwise be happy with backing up to commercial.
Yes.
That's a good idea to put the buffer. I've seen they have that along San Pedro. The houses on the west side of San Pedro, there's a homeowners association there that's real strong and keep the people from encroaching too close to their yards. So you could do the setbacks, Barry, like that, and landscaping and fencing and things like that. Yeah, so the residential people will be more flexible, or like you said, that might be a good idea to change if you change that to commercial, and give them a above market price for their homes. So
Yeah,
that they
that's a
can,
great incentive for somebody.
Yeah.
And if all the neighbors in the strip can agree to it, then you have something that will make a difference long term.
Mhm.
Outstanding conversation, you guys. Any other questions for Ernest and Cynthia? Okay, well, thank you guys so much. It really was a very interesting presentation and discussion. We appreciate it very much. And we'll hope to see you soon.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
I'll be over there. I'll be
Yeah.
going through there tomorrow.
Great job.
I will too.
Bye. Bye.
And- Okay. And I would suggest, folks, that we're a few minutes early for our 8:30, and I see the team is ready. Steve and Daniel and Charlie are on deck. So just a few minutes from now, why don't we start at about 8:30? Our next conversation is Live Workspaces. So we'll see you in a few minutes. Those guys are really, oop.
Hey, Jack, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can. How you doing, Barry?
Fine, Jack. That was some pretty harsh reality from Ernest and Cynthia about the image of Castle Hills. It's very disappointing. It's very hard for us to motivate people to come to Castle Hills for business when the public in general believes that Castle Hills is unwelcoming, and we need to overcome that stigma.
Well, yes, we do. And hopefully we've begun to, but it sounds like we still have a ways to go.
Apparently,
Yep. But you know, I thought it was valuable to have opinions from the outside because, you know, we can all be very sort of myopic with our own understanding of our own tiny little city. And there are these guys who have worked in San Antonio and all over the place for almost 40 years.
yeah.
And they have a world of experience that they can share with us. And, you know, I appreciated everything they said, although it was kind of hard to swallow there at times, but, you know, it is what it is.
Well, we needed the truth.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, well, it's about 8:30, so I think we'll get started with our next presentation and discussion. The topic is live workspaces. And these are kind of a trend that has a relatively new trend. We've seen some of it in San Antonio, but probably in other places around the nation and the world before that. But in any event, it's a very interesting concept and one that may have some relevance to us. I don't know. We've asked some experts to come in and talk to us about it. Stephen Birch from Gsc Architects and his associate Daniel Shear, as well as Charlie Weil from Transwestern, are going to help us get into that and understand it. What they are and what they do, and does it have any meaning to Castle Hills? So if I may, Stephen, if I may offer you the opportunity to get going. Thank you guys for joining us. We look forward to the conversation.
Yes, thank you, Jack. Want to make sure that you can hear me?
Yep, you're great.
All right, great. Well, I know that it's been a long evening for some of us, so we brought some energy with us to shake things up a bit. I want to wish everyone a good evening. We appreciate you sharing it with us. And we, of course, want to thank you for your invitation to discuss the characteristics of what we call live, work, and play. As Jack mentioned, my name is Stephen Birch. I'm a principal at Gsc Architects and a registered interior designer. I established and managed our San Antonio office, gosh, going on 6 years now, and bring with me just a little over 22 years of experience. I started when I was 12. That experience has afforded me the abilities to manage multiple aspects of client team and project coordination, all while, of course, generating new business. More importantly, though, this evening I bring with me Daniel Shear. He's a licensed architect and project manager with GSC. He's been experiencing this profession for 10 years now in both both private and publicly funded projects. His focus has been on residential new construction and remodel. Of course, that includes speculative commercial shells, tenant improvements, civic use, higher education. Daniel brings to our team an enhanced collaboration through each project, and we're really lucky to have him, from presenting concepts to clients and communities to working alongside team and consultants. And then, in addition to Daniel, we have Charlie. Charlie Weil is a vice president of tenant advisory for Transwestern. As a commercial real estate agent, he specializes in leasing, tenant representation, and investment sales in San Antonio and South Texas. With his expertise in space utilization, optimization, and planning, he guides clients through the leasing process of their ideal location, all while considering their culture, vision, and future growth. His integrity, market knowledge, and client-first approach are what we admire most about him, and the reason why we've asked him to join our team today. He's a resource that can play key roles in local and regional business development, and we felt like would be a utilized tool to our community. Both myself and Charlie are residences of Castle Hills. And if I may, I'd like to introduce Gsc Architects for just a moment, and then Transwestern before we begin our presentation. So again, thank you all for your attention. Gsc Architects was founded in 1978. We're an architecture interior design firm with both offices in Austin and San Antonio. Over the past 42 years, we've been entrusted with architectural commissions by numerous state departments, public work divisions, and schools across the state of Texas, as well as some of the largest corporate brand names in the US. So we bring a veteran presence of knowledge and experience with us. We champion the value of community while focusing on client-driven solutions. And we're also well known for our lead design prowess, and that speaks directly to sustainability. Deeply committed to greener environments and champion sustainability in all of our projects, both big and small. Together, we value community and encourage client-driven solutions, but most importantly, we always focus on the client's image in mind. In addition to GSC Architects, this evening we have Transwestern. We have the distinct pleasure of having Transwestern on our team this evening. This privately held Transwestern companies have been delivering a higher level of personalized service and innovative real estate solutions since 1978. So we share a birthday. Their integrated approach drives value for clients across commercial real estate services, development, and investment management, along with opportunistic programs for high net worth investors. So heavy hitters. The firm currently operates through 33 US offices, along with alliances that take their services across the globe. So a nice resource indeed. Before I hand off to Charlie, our objective this evening is to have a conversation about live, work, and play environments while including you in the discussion. And I'll go ahead and hand things off to Charlie.
Thank you, Stephen. I get my mute off here. And thank you all for having us here. It's as a resident of Castle Hills, I was very excited to be brought into this. And it's a very big, but very, initially I thought, unattainable type of concept here. But the more I looked at it, the more excited I got. And it is something that could certainly work and certainly help the city, a little bit longer term of vision, but very excited to be here. So I think that what we will start out, we've introduced kind of our backgrounds a little bit, but we wanted to start with, listening to Cynthia and Ernest earlier, I'm sure you've heard this multiple times, so I'm probably repeating ourselves, but kind of a challenges and opportunities for Castle Hills. Obviously, the limited amount of undeveloped sites and land in general is a huge challenge. Something like this doesn't take as big of a footprint as one may think all the time. It's very scalable, but you do need a piece that would work, at least 1.5 to a couple acres. So finding those opportunities would be important. And then some of the height limitations in reading the codes, there are some areas where you can do high rises, but there's only one, and everything is currently very just where something is, and there's no room to change. So density being very important. I think you've heard that in other presentations before, and Ernest mentioned, but it's very key to really kind of adding to your population. When we have a finite amount of land, the only way you can increase your population, increase your tax base is by getting more density one way or the other. So something like this may be something that gives you that density without having to go too much and change what folks like about Castle Hills and into the actual neighborhood. So on the opportunity side, in that regard, we did go through the Determining the Futures survey, and there was some interesting answers in there, and a few that we pulled out that we thought kind of went hand in hand with this sort of concept were a desire to gather. I mean, I'm a Castle Hills resident myself. We've got young kids. There's got to be a new couple pushing a stroller down the street in my neighborhood every 2 weeks, you know, so it's really changing. It's a really exciting time to be in Castle Hills, but there's not many places that have a lot of sense of culture and place. We have great restaurants, we have things, but there's not a lot of places to go gather, whether you want to meet for coffee, bring your kids, have a beer, have lunch, that it's a sense of place. So there was a desire for that, and something like this kind of fit the bill. Green spaces, a lot of times, which though they're not as big as parks, can be integrated in this sort of development, and a desire for walkability and connectivity, which a live work kind of development can really be a hub for. If you get enough things in there, then it can be a kind of the spoke of where people walk and go to different places in the city from. So and then also that desire to get density and downsize within the community. If your kids have gone on and you don't need the bigger house or the bigger place, somewhere to kind of stay in Castle Hills, stay next to your friends, your residences, without having to leave the city, all kind of work within this. So those are some of the challenges and opportunities with this. I'm going to turn it over to Daniel to talk about what a live, work, play development really is or looks like a little bit further, and then we'll circle back around after that.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you. Yeah. So in looking into live, work, play developments and using them ourselves, we wanted to find some common threads that would translate, we think, to a case study that Castle Hills could use and would fit in well without giving specific design criteria. So successful live, work, and mixed use developments share these characteristics. It makes them flexible, it makes them more highly utilized, and it makes them more valuable long-term. And so when you combine this with good design and these characteristics, you'll get longer term interest versus developments that you can see have initial high interest and then flame out over time. So we're thinking long term, you've been here 70 years, and we want this to be part of the next 70 and the future that Charlie was just talking about. So one characteristic that we looked into was density. So a typical acre in Castle Hills may have a single commercial use building, or it may have 2 or 3 homes on it. Dense developments like these, they allow both to happen together, and they allow them to happen in higher frequency. The good part about this is it's going to reduce the distance between live and work. So it speaks to that walkability, but it functions within your community on a lower demand for new infrastructure investment. So that development's going to house more people for less street, less pipe, less sewer. You get more bang for your buck. And we also saw that that was something people had some commentary on in the survey. So we know your residents are sensitive to that. Another is pedestrian as priority. So successful live work formats are going to prioritize the pedestrian experience over the convenience of vehicular access and upfront parking, like I think we're all pretty well used to. When you reduce the interactions between pedestrians and vehicles and you shelter pedestrians where they can't be completely inseparable, the space is more comfortable to use and encourages people to stay longer and explore them more organically on their own. Like Charlie talked about, public space, and not just as an amenity, but very public space, open areas that are not restricted as an amenity, varying shape and scale, often created for public use for gathering. You can do farmers markets, they can be play areas, spillover for bars and restaurants, all kinds of uses, often shaded with outdoor seating. Buildings and thoughtful landscaping can be boundaries that form these spaces, and pedestrian paths, keep them separated from vehicular traffic noise. They're also accessible. So well-designed paths, surfaces, and transitions between your buildings and your spaces make for more of the development to be accessible, not only to those with disabilities, but people who may be elderly, who may simply be moving slower, who may just need a little more space. Similar to the pedestrian's priority, when you're in line with this, it enables ease of access to more of the development and encourages people to stay longer because they're simply more comfortable and they can use more of the development. And then lastly is a diversity of use. So LiveWorks are at their best when they incorporate a lot of uses that activate them at different times and different days of the week. You know, office and residential, it provides a baseline for the number of people who will be there permanently and the number of people who would be there during the hours of 9 to 5 during the week. But then restaurant and bar and retail crowd can drive your traffic anytime they're open or then into the evening. By making the development more active for a longer span of time and at nights and weekends, you can turn it into a more regional hub, which gets to supporting your local businesses, not just from people within Castle Hills, but also people who are coming from other parts of San Antonio to experience your new district. And so we wanted to grab some examples, kind of a varying scale, to give an idea of what can be done, what this looks like. I think this one is one that's familiar to everybody. It's the Pearl. This is something that's ambitious in scale, but has grown very organically over time. It's very accessible. It emphasizes landscape. It really leverages and makes the most of open space. That bottom middle picture there between the bottling hall and Hotel Emma, that place is packed almost always now. And I think that's something that Charlie was getting at could be very useful. The planned Lone Star District is even bigger. Very similarly, it's leveraging open space. It's leveraging a variety of architectural scale in the buildings to be introduced. And it's going to be introducing a variety of uses. On the flip side of that, though, we wanted to show something that is more short-term attainable. So something that can happen on 1.5 acres to 2 acres is a development like Willa, which is in South Austin. It's a 4-story building. It incorporates a more limited amount of leasing space on the bottom. So for retail or restaurant use with condominiums above and buried parking. Or another local example, the Magnolia Heights, which of course is in Alamo Heights. We chose this one specifically because we understand that this is one that had a bit of consternation locally as it was passing through the approvals process. It does sit on a very prominent triangle of land where, of course, Broadway and Austin Highway split, but we think that this is in the vein of a successful live work because it connects to a busy corridor. There are a lot of people that use the businesses around there. It's walkable, and we feel like the scale does eventually work with the town that's around it. And so to sum it all up, we realize that some of these are a bit more ambitious, but we also understand that this doesn't have to happen overnight. It doesn't have to happen next year. It can also happen in pieces. Charlie's got some interesting insights, I think, on how we can move to get you guys in a position where you can have something like this eventually long-term.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. And I don't know if we can back up. Can we back up the slide or no, by chance? If not, no big deal. But what I wanted to speak to this a little bit, just piggybacking, and it'll be relevant what I'm saying. But I think one thing that is, and again, Daniel mentioned long-term, that's really a theme of what we're talking about today, because of the limitations we mentioned earlier, it's hard to go plop this anywhere right now other than that 4.2 acres Ernest talked about earlier, really being the only spot. But when we talk about live, work, play, it's easy to hear the Pearl, hear the Lone Star and go, there's no way that's going to happen here. There's nowhere for it. Too big, too much scale. But something like the Willa, I mean, that's 1.4 acres. There's houses on larger pieces of dirt than that in this area. Not as much on the frontage, but you get a couple together and you can make that happen. And then you do one of those, and you kind of have an area which starts being for those uses, that business district, that promotes a little bit bigger one the next time. So you can have this organic growth to grow an area over time by starting something very cool and small. Residents get there like, this is really neat. We're enjoying this. Everybody's gathering. We've got a lot more sense of community, and then it grows into something else. That's kind of the Magnolia Heights is the one that Ernest and Cynthia were talking about earlier. They can bring the name to, but that was a highly contested. I mean, Alamo Heights was not anything with height. They just did not want for so many years. And I think that now that it's there, it is, I don't think there's many complaints, and I think that it's been very well received. So sometimes it's just getting past that perception barrier, having people experience it and move on. So we can go to the next one. I just wanted to kind of round that out a little bit. Maybe make it seem a little bit more attainable because it could be. So in that regard, as y'all already know, so I'll try to make this part quick, but there's, our city is our city. We can't annex anything. We can't grow more. So we have to work with what we got. There's literally that one site that's buildable now that doesn't have anything on it. And then after that, really the only option is to have something redeveloped, which would really come in two fashions. One would be a, commercial property that is past its highest and best use, and is, and is got at a price point that allows to do something bigger. That speaks back to density and everything else, because to take a one-story building or a two-story building and be able to underwrite it, as Barry probably to be economically viable, you have to add more to it a little bit. And it doesn't have to be a 12-story monstrosity. Something like the Will is 4 stories, and it brings residences, brings stuff in. So in this slide, you'll see, what we do have is kind of set business districts already, and they also happen to be right at the kind of the fringes of the community. Obviously, they're going to butt up against houses in some areas, but we already have the inner workings of kind of these areas going. We also obviously had a lot of tax exempt space, as y'all know, and that I think is a good thing, that it happens to be right in and around these areas already. So you can't control any of these. They're not ours. They don't, whether it's a church or anything up to the Boy Scout tract, those are held by parties that we don't have any control over. You don't have any control over as a city. But things do change, and sometimes it's things that you think never will. And so I think what we're advocating here is really kind of doing what you're doing now. And I don't want to steal the thunder on the next slide, but starts with this comprehensive plan and these conversations. So pat everybody on the back. You're doing the right thing now. You're doing in looking at this. I think the next step is to look at that plan, maybe look at some overlays in some of these areas that don't apply now because there's already a building there. But should there come an opportunity in the future, now you've got some districts where maybe you could do a 3 or 4 or 5 story mixed use development, maybe have some mixed use overlays in some of these areas that then developers understand are there. And then as opportunities arise in the future, whether it be next year, 5 years, 20 years down the road, they know, hey, I could do this there. And there's ideas out there so that if that opportunity arises, there's interest, y'all have a plan, y'all know how, and everything's set so that you're not kind of caught off guard without, because tax exempt isn't really a zoning. And there may be something underlying, we don't know that much about the codes here, but if you had these saying, hey, if anything changed here, this is what we would allow, it could then create that path for folks wanting to get in and invest and develop in Castle Hills to know where to do it and how to do it. So there's kind of our thoughts on that.
Thank you, Charlie. As Daniel and Charlie both mentioned, we're off to a good start. We're having conversations about it. So now we can just discuss next steps. There's a quote that we wanted to kind of remind everybody of. It was our first mayor of Castle Hills, Leonard Yeckel. And his quote is, "The success of the development and growth of our city cannot be credited to any one person. Each person who has served the city, each resident that has lived here has contributed to our success in one way or another. So I'd like to kind of initiate this open discussion, open dialogue with truly what are our next steps.
Yeah, and I think like we talked about, you're doing it. I mean, this is step one, is looking at this comprehensive plan, looking at your zoning, looking at your overall kind of approach to business that Cynthia and Ernest talked about earlier, and then starting to make changes within these areas so that you get the growth you want, where you want it, and in the way you want it. And that's one of the nice things about kind of zoning and things, and opening those things up maybe to a use that's not there today. It allows us for those possibilities in the future. And, you know, I think we're at our 70-year anniversary here, and, you know, it's not too outlandish to look at a 20, 30, 50, 70-year plan. And we're excited about the next 70, but, you know, SA 2020 long ago seemed like a long way out, and we blink and it's here. So I think they got a lot done in that, and some similar vision for the city long-term could go a long way. And also kind of help with that whole theme of, hey, we're open for business. We want to be easy to work with, that you heard about before. And then lastly, kind of build that helps you then build relationships. If you do get a comprehensive plan that has some changes, allows for different things, you can then, as a council, as business members within the city, folks like me and Steven who live here, we love it here. We want to be here, you know, forever. Can go help and reach out to folks, whether it be developers and so forth, and get them excited and show them the opportunities. And that way they're bought in, they're thinking about that. There's a lot of work that goes into something. It's a very long timeline. So if somebody has, even if they don't have the specific site, but they have an idea in mind, they can move a lot faster and increase the success or the likelihood that, you know, the community gets what they want when there are opportunities that arise. So that's kind of where we close, is just, you know, do what you're doing now and be ready to set the stage so that when opportunities arise, when a land tract is available, maybe there's houses like they mentioned earlier, that may not be a bad idea to, you know, say, hey, if we can acquire these 4, we not only have a buffer, but you know, we can do something really neat with this area that we think would be well received. And it may take you 20 years to acquire them, but, you know, you got to start somewhere. So just be ready to take advantage of those opportunities when they arise. Or those are our kind of recommended next steps. So we're just grateful to be here and be a part of it. And if we can make any impact as residents, as Leonard said, we'd love to be an asset to do so.
Thank you, Charlie. We really at this time want to kind of open it up to everybody. We want to hear your ideas, your thoughts, and most importantly, your opinions. So let's just have a group discussion.
Any questions?
I think we have a very shy group tonight, guys.
It's National Dog Day, and I've got my little dog sidekick here growling. That's why I stepped. She wants to get in the conversation.
No judgment here.
Dogs are welcome to.
This is all so great, and I think it's going to take some time to work on. It won't happen overnight. But I think that we all need to be looking toward the future. And this has been such a great thing that Jack and Amy and everybody has put together. I said that the other night too, and it just gets better and better. And I like, you know, if we're going to have any kind of a tax base and be able to support the community, we have to add more. We just have to. And it's time, instead of, well, we like our residential. Well, yeah, I do too. But, you know, sometimes you've got to, we're not going to be here forever. None of us is. And I support whatever plans go forward. I'll just tell you, and if there's some way that I can participate and be helpful and make some kind of a contribution, I would love to do that. And I'll mute myself again. Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Charles. And thank you, Stephen, and all of y'all who've been here tonight. It's just been it's been great. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We do appreciate that. Anyone else? Don't be shy.
So if I may, you guys, Charlie, you identified some, I don't know, just broad areas that probably are the most commercial here in Castle Hills and, you know, perhaps looking to the future in the next 70 years. It strikes me that especially that area on 410 and Blanco, I guess on the north side, is really and truly underutilized. Does that resonate with you guys? I mean, I know you're looking at these beautiful live workspaces. And by the way, thank you for a beautiful presentation. I love all of these drawings that stimulate your imagination and make you think of what might be. This is really good, guys. Thank you all so much. But anyway, the question is there an underutilization of some of these pieces now that might suggest, you know, perhaps a quicker start to some of these terrific ideas?
You know, I think specifically, yes. You know, I think Ernest mentioned, you know, and it's a scale question. So obviously, the smaller the tracts, the quicker you can do something, because the quicker you can put it together. Ernest mentioned some along military that are just currently commercial that are not really that well utilized. But on Blanco, that area you mentioned, I think that is, you've definitely got some of that there too. The challenge is one of them was recently redeveloped, you know, so that there's gonna be a lead time there. That business model is going to go on probably for a while. There's some office there that is very antiquated and probably past its highest and best use. You know, both of those together would be a pretty good, tremendous track. That said, it is also right there next to Park North, so it won't create as much identity. It will help tax base wise and help, you know, that would be a great place to do something that would be maybe higher end, maybe condos somewhere that residents looking to get out of a larger house they have to maintain could move to. That's a great spot for that, in my opinion. I know that's kind of what's there, but that building's been there a very long time. If there's something brand new, you know, it could be potentially more appealing and more successful there. I think that something, you know, on the very north side there's some underutilized tracks. There's a few, you know, residential tracks that could potentially, you know, over time maybe be repurposed. Not necessarily much as more for mixed use, but, you know, down Lock Hills, there's already office there. There's some big tracks. There's almost an entire corner that could eventually be more office. I think somebody asked about that. So that would kind of be a natural growth area for garden office or something like that. You wouldn't go real high there because you are surrounded by houses, but you know, that 4-acre tract is a great place for anything a little bit higher, as Ernest mentioned. And then, you know, really any of these non-taxables, anything up along 410, I mean, the area is very noisy already, you know, so there's a lot of traffic. So something in any of those areas that maybe would be, you know, you could pick up some developable tracks over time, could be kind of workable areas too. But I think from an identity standpoint, you know, it would serve well to do something like this, maybe kind of more around the intersection or area of West and Military, because there's just a little bit more identity there versus just thinking it's a development right next to Park North. If it was something Castle Hills wanted to truly make its own. Kind of far-fetched idea if we want to go there, but I'll throw it out there. Castle Hills Elementary and that honeysuckle corridor, you know, one of the biggest issues I see is that separation of city, the two areas. There's really no way to safely walk between. This is kind of very big and grand, but if there were tracks, I mean, there is some land across from Castle Hills next to that little office building, and there's a few houses there. that could be something really cool if those three, or maybe that entire block kind of around City Hall, could be turned into something, and then we somehow make an investment in that intersection such that, I'm not talking land bridge, Harburger Park land bridge or anything, but something that's actually a neat, you would take the feeder roads over and make that a dedicated connectivity between the two cities, would make a huge difference. I mean, if you could just, kids, everybody could ride their bike to school. That's why I kind of pick Honeysuckle. You know, everybody on the south, instead of having to get in their car and drive and get in line like I do to drop our kids off, if there was a very cool, safe, you know, you could go under as a tunnel, but I think you may have issues with, you know, practicality of water and things like that. But that would be a very big change for the city overall, and bring those two areas together and allow for that walkability of both, you know, and by the school, both students and parents alike. I mean, now you will have folks walking their kids to school versus driving their car, you know, a quarter mile.
That's a great thought, Charlie. And imagine if that pedestrian bridge was something like the High Line in New York, where it's actually, it's green. There's shrubs and grasses and bushes and artwork and all kinds of beautiful things. And that's just built on an old train trestle, which is, well, it varies in width, but, you know, maybe 50 feet wide at the widest.
Yeah, great example.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly the vision I was kind of thinking, is something that's inviting and walkable, and really connect those two communities. And now if you did something on, you know, it doesn't have to be the north side's things and the side, you could, you know, ride your bike right up there and create that connectivity and trails. The nice thing about a lot of our streets is they're not really heavily trafficked. When you get back in a lot of these, they're very bikeable and walkable.
Yeah, one of the things the architects talked about Tuesday night in their discussion of their approach to our plan was the idea of connections, connectivity through transportation, through streets and things like that. So that may be one way to achieve a connection from north to south and further. I mean, all the way up to the way north and way south, perhaps. That, you know, because the bridging 410 is the big problem. If we can figure that out, the rest of the connections may fall into place.
And that's a very natural place to do it. I mean, you got, you know, so many of the residences' children go right there. So it's already utilized that way. It would, you know, you'd get some of the traffic out of there, and drop off and everything else. So it's about as central as you can get.
It's true. And the alignment to, of course, Castle Hill City Hall, it serves as somewhat of a promenade to that connection between Honeysuckle on both sides of 410. So it speaks highly to that central connectivity that I feel like we are saying over and over again.
Right. And so, and you know, right across from Castle Hills, there's already, you know, there is another vacant tract there. And, you know, with the long-term acquisition, a few of those houses, I mean, you could put something pretty good size together, big enough to do a park. I mean, we have the playground there, so that with the school already, but, you know, something that's a little bit more kind of open and you know, more like you see in the pictures where groups may gather to do yoga in the morning or whatever. You know, not the park behind the school is obviously a playground, you know, so you could do more of more an open space for adults and kids alike there.
Any other questions or comments that you'd like to share?
You know, I think the only other thing I'll say is just as far as like, and this is not my expertise, so pardon me if I don't want to, but like from a zoning standpoint, you know, what development and business folks, they kind of, sometimes the city doesn't have to do everything themselves. If you just took an area and said, hey, by the way, this can be, even if it's a few residences over this time, this can be this, if all these are acquired, business figures it out, and the opportunity buys it, and it may be somebody picking up those houses on their own nickel as a developer over 15 years, renting them out as rentals, until they get them all. And then now, once they get their density, once they get what they need, then they can do that project. So, you know, just allowing that and saying, hey, if you want to do something like this in these areas, we'll allow it. Sometimes is all you need to do to have ingenuity take care of the rest.
Very good point.
Any further questions, folks? Okay, well, gentlemen, thank you so much. It was a really stimulating presentation. We appreciate it very much. Thank you for your terrific ideas. And we'll hope to see you soon. And before we sign off for the night, though, I need to put a pitch in for Saturday's program, if I may. We've got 6 conversations and presentations planned for Saturday, starting off at 9 o'clock with economic development. Ernest mentioned a young lady by the name of Jimsy Cuborn, who's in charge of economic development in Converse. And also there's a gentleman by the name of Mark Luft, who has spent his entire career in economic development. So we'll have 2 experts help us understand what that means and how we go about it. And then at 10 o'clock, our very own Agdel Rivera, who, gosh, I guess he must have just signed off. But anyway, Agdel's been with us most of the night. He's a very talented architect, and he works for the city in their Greenway department. And he's going to help us understand green spaces, what opportunities there might be for green spaces in San Antonio. And also Mr. Bill Barker, who is a sort of a renowned planner, will walk us through some ideas about sustainability. Then at 11, we're going to talk about education. Mr. Leos from Northeast ISD will be joining us to make a brief presentation and answer whatever questions we might have. Then at 1:30, we're going to talk about crime prevention. So we're going to have some of the guys here from Castle Hills, I believe one of the detectives and sergeants, and perhaps Captain Wagoner, help us figure out how we can avoid cyber theft and home theft and all kinds of things like that. Then at 2:30, we're going to be talking about aging in place. And we have a woman by the name of Vona Smith, who is from the Jewish Family Services Group, who's kind of an expert in aging. And this aging in place is one of many categories that she's knowledgeable in. And then last but not least, at 3:30, we're going to talk about transportation. Again, Mr. Barker, who is his specialty actually is transportation. He'll make the main presentation, and they have a couple of fellas helping him out. A gentleman from the MPO by the name of Joey Pollock, and a transportation planner by the name of David Bemperod, who will also supplement those presentations. So we think there's a lot of good subjects, a lot of terrific presenters, and hopefully a lot of good conversation as well. Because of the virus thing, we've had to throw out the lunch. We were originally going to do a lunch and refreshments and all that. We're not going to be doing that anymore. But in any event, everybody's welcome. Please tell your neighbors, and same time, same channel, that is to say, and Scott's got the Zoom all figured out for us. And so we'll look forward to seeing you on Saturday.
Thank you, Jack. Again, it's been a sincere pleasure. And we look forward to continuing our relationships from this night on.
Very good. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank y'all.
Enjoy your
Great
evening.
Thanks, folks. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye, y'all.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.